the guide itself. Does everybody have a copy of the guide? Does anybody not have a copy of the guide? So maybe someone here, Chris, can get a copy to each of them, because we will be going through it page by page so that you understand what's in it and you can speak to it generally. So again, my name's Nancy Gothard and I'm environmental planner at the City of Courtenay. So I'm going to talk about the content of the guide, but I also want to share a bit about the process that went into making it in order to share some of the learning that's gone along the way. As you've now been briefed in this last like 45 minutes, you can see that this is a long story, there's a big context to what we're trying to do. Today we're just talking about one particular tool, a guide that we can all use at the front counter. In varying capacities depending on what our skill sets are, but nevertheless it's a small piece that contributes to that bigger picture. So first of all, what's the guide for? It is a communication tool. It's a call to action as well as a general awareness tool. And it's also an invitation to applicants to prepare applications that are as rainwater friendly as they can. What you'll see throughout the guide is that it's not actually, some of the tools that we talk about may not be actually required, but we're certainly trying to work in a voluntary, collaborative way with applicants to try and all work towards those goals. Until the day comes when we may actually have it become required, but we're not there yet. It's to be handed out with all application documents, so in the building, the servicing, the planning departments, that have an impact on rainwater management. So that would include things like even tree cutting permits, or if someone's adding imperviousness to their site, so a deck or a driveway. Some staff will use this guide much more than others, and will be responsible for administrating some of the actual tools that are contained within, so particularly the development services department, the planning and the engineering, I can see being the main ones. However, it's important that all staff who work with land development and operations are aware of the guide and can reference its intent generally. So that's the expectation. Nobody has to get nervous about knowing all the ins and outs of an erosion control bylaw or something like that for today's purpose. So yeah, the point is broad awareness across many departments and across our various jurisdictions for today. So if applicants, so when you're using the guide, if applicants have questions about it that you're not able to answer, it's absolutely acceptable that you refer them to the staff who have more familiarity. So after today, you're going to go back to your various jurisdictions, and you can talk more, you know, in a huddle with your people in your jurisdiction about how, you know, who's the right one to be speaking to the various tools in there. So I'm certainly going to be doing that at the City of Courtenay. And so why the guide in the first place? Well, we recognized that we needed a starting point. That as a starting point, we needed a way to communicate this story of why watershed-based and ecosystem-based planning is necessary, the strategies available to us, and the roles that each audience plays in achieving it. Is that phone going to go, do you think? Is that? We'll just give it a chance to be
it's for you, Nancy.
Answered. I missed the presentation. I want to be there. So, and the main message of this document is that if an applicant takes the time to consider these factors and get their application right at the front end and work collaboratively with us regulators, that ideally their project should proceed smoother. So our goal was to begin to brand this story that you've now heard, you know, 45 minutes now. We're trying to brand it into a more concise package, and to make it visible on the various regulatory agencies' front counters in the valley. So to depict visually that we are developing a consistency in expectations. That may sound like a relatively minor or benign thing, but it's not something that we do right now, our 4 jurisdictions. So we consider this a big step if we can start having very similar materials at the front counter. Yeah, and we will also have a website too, which Jack spoke. No, I think Chris may have spoken about it very vaguely or very briefly. But for now, we're just talking about the guide. So, and I'm not going to, I think initially we weren't envisioning an actual marketing strategy, but I think that that's where this work might eventually go. We've seen our counterparts, and I think it's in Coquitlam, if it's Melanie Burton, is that right? So they've actually developed marketing campaigns around this topic. So they have a lot of, you know, interlocking kind of educational pieces that work well together. For us, we're starting with the guide and the website. And we started with the assumption that the development community and development applicants were our target audience, but as the discussions evolved, it became really clear that there are many actors who can have leading roles in watershed management. Like when we were talking about all this stuff this last 45 minutes, as you can see, there's a lot of players who are involved. So I just wanted to share this image with you. I know it's very complex. You don't really have to take anything away from it other than this team, the CAVI team, has spent some time grappling with who this target audience is for achieving these watershed goals and what the strategies are to achieve them. And what we've come to understand is that the topic is very complex with many different aspects of how we do development that have to change, and that there are many different actors in the process. And so Kim will often remind us that here in BC we rarely have land use and servicing management directives from the province. We have more like enabling legislation. So that means we have many tools and legislation to say that ecologically based rainwater management is important and is possible and is within our legal means, but that we're not really being required to administer this program as of yet. Now the gas tax money is a little different. That's an incredible carrot. So I mean, in a way that's telling you have to start doing it. So. And so we at the CAVI table felt that there was a particular star actor that can shine wherever they are in the system. So depending on what their day-to-day is like, is their job to do with big picture and governance, like CAOs and politicians? Is their job to deal with the development, regulatory, or operational processes, so staff and development community, these kinds of things? Is the job in reaching the people? That's what Jack and David were just talking about, so the NGOs. Or maybe even working on a project together, all of us together. So this table is just meant to show the different aspects of the work, the desired outcomes, and the leaders within each of these areas as we try to work together to achieve rainwater management. Again, this is a bit of a departure from the guide. This is just the context to the guide, but we thought we'd share it with you to just give an appreciation to that. And I'm sure that we're all aware of this kind of circular conversation, anybody who's involved in kind of change management, that occurs when we discuss transformative change really in any topic area. It's, where do we begin in this work? It's the politician's role to show leadership, it's the public's role to elect enlightened leaders, it's staff's role to advise their council, it's the nonprofit's role to educate the public who go on to elect their officials. So which comes first? And where do we invest our limited time to get the results we desire? Well, the message is that it's all of us, and on all those levels all the time, ideally, being champions where we can. So the guide is one tool we thought could help to communicate this story, get the branding out, start the conversation, and that it's relatively low-hanging fruit as one tool in the overall toolbox. So I just want to give a shout out to the Bowker Creek Developers Guide. Through the interregional sharing, we've learned of what others are doing. So the Capital Regional District provide inspiration to us to provide our own guide. And so who knows, maybe one day we'll have guides all over the Georgia Basin, and that will help again with that branding of message and expectation. So the guide is messaged for any landowner, whether professional developer or a resident in a single family home. Our document is in essence, like I said, both a call to action for the community, but also for us. You know, we recognize we're appealing to our colleagues to also get excited about this, and as well as a roadmap for that action. And it's been created to communicate expectations. Now, as we go through the guide, I just want to acknowledge that the copy you have is a little different than the one that we have up on the board, but it's basically substantively the same. And I will also notice, I just caught it right now because I printed off 200 of these this morning. On the next page, the text here is just like, it all got, I don't know what it is, it lost its spaces between the words. I don't know what happened there. So we're going to have to work on getting a cleaner version because the vision statement reads like, you know, 1,000 character statement. So that's a little difficult to read.
Promoting densification.
Yeah, yeah, densification of words. Yeah, there we go. So on the second page, the document is structured to flow from this call to responsibility story that we've been talking a bit about, highlight the overarching policies in place to steer the work, the tools available to us, and the tips to applicants to prepare successful applications. So that comes on the next pages. I'll talk about that. But this page highlights that we have established valley-wide vision that supports watershed health. And this was established in the Regional Growth Strategy in 2011. And right there, it talks about conserving water, energy, land resources. So, I mean, as a pinnacle guiding direction for our community, we have that mandate to start to develop the tools that reflect that vision. And this page also talks about the benefits of green infrastructure, just in a little bit more detail, which we'll actually talk about when we talk about the specific strategies. So on the next page, the bigger picture, we each have a role to play page. It highlights the hierarchy of policy and regulatory tools that flow from the province. So up here, this is where the province guys are working, and where all the local governments get their powers from, through to the individual landowner, ultimately who's doing the work and the implementation of their particular development plan. So we wanted to communicate that when we ask an applicant to consider sensitive rainwater management approaches, that it's not just because we think it's nice or that it's the fad, or that the environmental sector came and asked us to do it, but it's being directed and enabled. So I said directed, but it's for now it's more of an enabling or carrot kind of approach by this high-level provincial policy and legislation that's supporting this shift. So again, some of those really high-level directives and acts, the Living Water Smart Directive, the Green Communities Act, the Water Sustainability Act, and they're all providing us with the ability to require more sensitive approaches to rainwater management. Now, CABI is a regional team, and it provides this forum for this inter and intra-regional sharing. And I'm just going to say personally, it's been very rewarding to be able to have a forum, to be able to connect to other people. I mean, I work in the Valley as well, and I don't often meet with people from the other jurisdictions within the Valley, never mind people from the other regions themselves, which of course are all working on this directive in the Georgia Basin. So this is a bit of a bottom-up movement amongst the local governments to try to create this movement together. So I really applaud the CABI approach. And we recognize that bottom-up can take some time and requires a steady building of support, but that it actually can have more lasting impacts than top-down because we created the changes ourselves and within our own context. So I think there's something to celebrate there. Now, the next kind of, so from the province through to this enabling group, we have our own tools, regional growth strategies, OCP. Some of us are very familiar with those, use them very regularly. These are high-level policy tools that set the vision and priorities for our community's growth. And then from these documents, the nuts and bolts of our regulatory system is created. So the tools that we use on the ground, and I'm going to talk about those. And then, of course, the landowner, let's not forget them in this whole picture. They're the star actor audience in this document, and they're where the rubber hits the road. It's because with their private market capital that they create the communities that we all live in. So it can feel like a really long journey from this kind of high level down to this landowner, but we wanted to try and communicate that in a way so that people who don't think about those, big provincial policies can understand it. And perhaps you yourselves, as you're just looking at this document, you can think about where your own role lies. Now, getting into the centerfold, it shows selected strategies and tools that can be used by local governments to achieve watershed health outcomes. So, as 4 distinct communities with each our own priorities and capacities, we're not all implementing those tools. So, again, it's going to be important for you to go and connect with each of your respective CABI team reps to understand where your particular jurisdiction is at. So there is an extra step after today. But the purpose of this page is to demonstrate what local governments can do and to demonstrate what may be requested or required of a local government as an applicant works through their application. So that an applicant can better understand that when they're being asked for things like tree protection or soil conservation or rain garden, or that they manage their erosion and sediments on their site, that they understand that those actions are part of that bigger watershed message. And a couple of us are going to talk about these tools after I talk about the guide more generally. So on the strategy page, just as a high level, it talks about some of the complementary collaborative initiatives that are underway regionally. So drinking water protection, sensitive ecosystem mapping, and the hard science that the nonprofit sector contributes locally to this work. And then it talks about how watershed planning is an important approach to putting all these pieces together. And I think that's a really good point, Kim, that you mentioned about a plan doesn't have to generate out of nothing. A plan can help harmonize what already is and isn't working and work out those kinks. So I think some people get a little bit afraid when we talk about doing a plan. That, oh man, that's gonna take forever, but it can coordinate too. So and then so talking about how stormwater, rainwater assets, including our creeks, their condition, and to determine their level of service and reaching out to the community is what plans can help do. Now, education, oh, I lost my thought. Oh yeah, so just in general, education, like let's not forget that in part what we're doing today, but then also other education tools to reach out to the public, continue to build support for that message. So the City of Courtenay, for instance, has an annual State of the Environment report, and we're just acknowledging that. So I am going to skip past the actual tools because we're going to talk about each one of them separately. So we can jump to page 6 there. So on the tips page, offers some guidance to an applicant to help them prepare for the kinds of questions that we as regulators are going to be looking for with regards to watershed health. So the main message to them is follow these steps and your application will be that much closer to getting it right at the front end than if they don't follow the steps. And so, and what we're trying to communicate is that if they get it right from the beginning, that can save us all time. So because this tips list is not a legislative process, we did have to keep it relatively high level. And some of us may even find obvious. I know some of my colleagues are like, well, this is kind of no-brainer stuff. But we don't actually have these tips, this process articulated anywhere for someone to walk away with. So while it may seem no-brainer to us, we did want to share that for people who are preparing applications. So the applications, just some of the tips, I mean, just let's go through them. Talk to the right people early on to avoid unnecessary delays. Communicate throughout the process with all the players, and particularly the planning and building inspection departments and engineering. Demonstrate leadership to help gain local government and public support. Understand local government policy and regulations affecting the site, and use green infrastructure where they can. Now, in the then actually getting down into more specific questions about their site, at the planning stage, it says before doing any physical alterations to the site, take the following steps. Understand how your land drains, what watershed you're in, what topographic features are on your site, those kinds of questions. Use site design that appropriately fits the land. I'm sure we've all seen a subdivision application that comes in that seems like it could have come in from anywhere. It really has nothing to do with the land on which it's trying to develop. So that's a very important, obvious, but important message to remind people. And so again, notice this is actually happening before the application's even submitted. Arrange a pre-application meeting, and then, so talk to staff before applying. At the City of Courtenay, we have a limit of 2 of those meetings, so it is important that people understand this is not an unending, level of support that we can provide on pre-application. But nevertheless, come talk to staff, and then submit the application. And it's really important that people recognize that this. Well, my previous boss, Peter Crawford, he used to always say that applicants often didn't realize that their application starts here in terms of the clock ticking. They think as soon as they have an idea that or they've talked to us once that their application is now in process. So for them, time is money. It's important that they recognize that only once the application is complete. And then tips on implementation. It's some basic things. Again, implement site management plans. These often include things like erosion control, construction management, and tree protection plans. And then, sorry, I keep touching the wrong thing. Inform the landowner of their green infrastructure. So actually also again at the city, so I'm speaking from my own experience at the city, we're starting to require that if their green infrastructure assets, particularly in stratas, that maintenance manual be created and that be provided to the strata so that people understand what it is. I know that Judy talks about an example up in Cumberland where there was some sort of rainwater rock feature and people didn't know what it was and they paved over it, and so now that's not providing its function. And then on your own guide there, we actually added the piece of maintain, and that's just to maintain the green asset. So that's recognizing that the ultimate landowner has a role. Now, I just wanted to, so again, you don't have to take anything away from this, it's just a visual aid, but the feedback that we've been given is that the guide is quite high level, for better or worse, and maybe even perhaps a little too much so. But I did just want to clarify that we did look at the possibility of working on procedures with a little more detail, with more teeth, and realize that our 4 jurisdictions, we just have different processes, capacities, and cultures, and that it's just not appropriate for us right now. So this schematic is of a rezoning and OCP review process from Kamloops, which shows the various steps and stakeholders that are along the way. So we batter around the idea of, okay, developers are asking for real strong clarity of like what happens to their application once they put in the stream. So should we map this out? Should we aim to have this be really consistent for our 4 jurisdictions? But again, because of those differences in capacities and cultures, it couldn't be the case. And so that's why we see a more high-level type of approach, something that all 4 of us could agree on, which, yeah, it can take some effort. So on the last page, second to last page, it just talks about some perspective on what individuals can do on their property, what you can do to support rainwater management, and what local governments do. And I find that this part actually I personally appreciate. I find the public sometimes believes that the city is there to do actual assessments on their property, engineering or biological assessments. So it's important to let them know that we're regulators. We create the vision, the framework for doing development, but we ourselves are not coming on their property and doing assessments. So this will help clarify that. And then the last page shows all the watersheds in the Comox Valley, which, just like what we just did here, I'm pinning. And the goal is that every applicant, everyone, will know which watershed they're living and working in, and that we can connect them to the appropriate stewardship group. We can share the relevant existing studies of what watershed they're in. Perhaps watershed libraries was a vision that we had, that you just click on the website, it tells you everything there is about Brooklyn. Actually, Project Watersheds already they already have a lot of that compiled, but how can we use those resources more to connect them to an applicant right at the beginning stages? That's the goal of what we're thinking. And then to encourage an applicant to think like a watershed just right from the beginning. Again, this is just a shout out to our the fact that we have other educational materials that can support this one as well, this one being for the city of Courtney. And again, recognizing the role of DeKalb and the regional piece, I was so heartened just 2 weeks ago, I learned that the regional district of Nanaimo saw Courtney's State of the Environment, State of Our Streams report, and then they mimicked it for all of their streams. So it's, there's no reinventing here. We're just able to kind of cut and paste, and that makes things move a lot quicker. So, we had a little bit of humor in here. Hopefully people find it funny too. So here, I'll just emphasize here what it says. Sorry, I lost my sheet here. I actually had some notes on this. There we go. So in this slide, this is from, when was it? 80s, 70s maybe? 66. 66, okay, all right. So each day, Humboldt Oil and Refining Company supplies enough energy to melt 7 million tons of glacier. Like, that's not that long ago that now that is seen as like, whoa, we do not want to be doing this. So we just wanted to show a slide like this because it's what we're talking about today is a new way of doing business. It's about change. It's about our roles in that change. The hope that you'll feel inspired to participate in that change, exercising creativity and judgment in that change, and to communicate that change can happen. It does happen. It has to happen. And as Jack often actually will remind us, is that we're still living with the effects of these old malpractices. So rather than creating mistakes that we're having to go and restore, let's just be a little more vigilant on that front. So here's another piece of kind of humor back from 1935. So how to dynamite and streamline streams. And now, I mean, for us riparian ecologist types, it's like, oh wow, no, you want complexity, you want it to be able to be, cycling a lot of nutrients and holding a lot of water and structure for habitat. So this is just, things change. I thought we had another one in there. Okay, so the Comox, and this one's from our colleague at Timber West. So he's just showing that in 1965, the approach to logging, just wider, these larger patches, no riparian cover. And then today, they do.
Nancy, it's even worse than that. The only part not logged was too steep to log.
The only part not.
Everything else is gone.
They took whatever stick they could, and now they have to manage for more valleys.
Through wetlands, through lakes.
Yeah. Thank you, Jack. Yeah, you've got a great historical perspective on that. And then this slide is just to communicate that we often feel like we're herding cats. Like takes a lot of effort because we're trying to tap into your hearts and minds and all that kind of thing. So the more that we can work together is that's the goal. So now we're going to